Appreciate it. I think Nick was getting bored and hadn't seen your faces in a long time. So we organized this. Just I don't have any big announcements, but do just want to circle back. We haven't talked in a while, but a few thoughts first, and then we'll open it up for questions. So back in May, we took our budget cuts and in personnel and operations and travel, and we were kind of ahead of the curve and had been getting good advice from the university and based that on 20%, what we felt 20% reductions in revenues. To do that, and probably by August may have to make adjustments up or down, but should know a little bit more by then how things are going. As you know, we got our student athletes and teams back on campus and started to repopulate. Us and the vet med students were kind of the first in athletics, and the vet med students were back, but we've tested over 370 or more. Nick may have the exact number, and have had 10 positives. But from our tracing, none of those positives are connected to workouts or being in our facilities. It's everyday life of going to social gatherings like weddings and other gatherings outside of athletic activities. And so we feel very good about our screening and our testing, cleaning, and the protocols we have in place. It's those hours outside of those times, or the where things are happening, I guess, if you will. SEC football update, that's kind of a big one. We're still having our SEC biweekly calls, and with the 14 ADs and SEC leadership. We're getting advice continually from the medical task force of the SEC, and then our campus, and then we have an athletics working group as well, led by Tim Hickman. But we're going to continue and plan on meeting until further notice through July here and August. And then as we get closer towards the end of July, we'll be coming up with plans that we can present to the chancellors and presidents on what we think fall can look like. But there's a bunch of different models for football. There's a lot of things out there in the public, but we'll be prepared to adjust if necessary to a schedule that best accommodates what we're hearing from the medical officials and campus officials at the time. Test protocols are driving a lot of that discussions with the football bowl subdivision, and we're being updated on that with the Power 5 and the FBS, and we're looking at different models internally with our staff is looking at as far as what we could do with the stadium. I think ticket office has 13 variations of configurations, and we spend a lot of time. We're spending more of our time on a 50% model because we can adjust and go from up or down on that. We've been working with a third party leaders, polling our fan base, as well incorporating national trends into our plans as we move forward. So as we've said from the start, the health and safety of our student athletes, our staff, and our fans is the number one goal, and so we'll be looking to manage all of that. With that, I'll open it up for questions. You can start firing away.
Bill, go ahead. You can unmute yourself.
All right. Yeah, thank you. A couple questions. If you could just comment on the great news about eligibility next postseason for baseball and softball. And then and I don't know if you can answer this or not, but what is the bare minimum, the best case scenario in terms of how many fans could attend football? What's the low number that would be okay for you guys?
So obviously really excited to hear the news on baseball and softball. We thought that would be the case, but it ended up being the right decision, and so I know that both the coaches coaches and head coaches and coaching staffs and student athletes are ecstatic about that. And so we can finally move forward with that. As far as bare minimum, if we truly, did a 6-foot radius around, everybody and did it, I think you could fit, our folks have looked at it, it's about 18 to 20,000 or something like that in the stadium. So, and that's not counting the media room. So I don't know what Nick would do with all of you. So,
38
but that,
seats.
what's that?
38 seats. If we go to
38
two,
seats. All right. To the
6
highest bidder. All right. We can do that. But that's kind of the bare minimum as far as, I think as far as what we could do in the stadium.
Thank you.
Gabe?
Okay, sorry about that. Jim, I know you said end of July, you guys want to be able to present some sort of plan. I guess two things. When's the date where, like, there has to be a plan, not this is what we're talking about, but this is what we want to do. And can you just assess the mood of, because the mood we all get from talking to people at various schools is there's not anybody in the country that feels better about the chances of playing than they felt a month ago. And please tell me if that's wrong.
No, I think that's an accurate statement, but I guess I'm an optimist from the standpoint of, 3 weeks ago we were really optimistic, and people were saying they were going to have full stadiums and all of that, and now the pandemic is kind of resurged a bit, if you will, and the pro sports have stumbled as they've started out of the blocks, but I think and it's positive for us that we can see what's working from their standpoint and apply that to decisions we make. But I think, it continues to change daily and weekly, and in a month, in 2 months, I'm hopeful it's a heck of a lot better and things are better than what we have. If not, then we have to pivot and adjust our plans.
we'll go to Matt next.
Matt, I'm not a liberator.
There it goes. All right. Jim, Boone County and Columbia have had restrictions on reopening themselves, and part of that is a restriction on mass gatherings. And there had been some indication that maybe with local virus cases spiking a bit, that we might see some of those limits into the future. As far as you know, do those sorts of limits apply to your sporting events, indoor, outdoor, or otherwise, when it comes to either fans or even participants?
So obviously we take, we take advice from the medical and the county health officials are kind of the preeminent, obviously state and everything apply from there. So we'll be taking advice from them and working with them. We've been in contact with them. They understand what we're doing and what we're trying to do. And so I think we're in a good place with them.
We'll go to
Thanks.
Dave next. Matter.
Hey, Jim, how viable is this talk of maybe only playing conference games for football this year? Is that a model that's been discussed? And then where are you guys in terms of your 4 non-conference games? Has there been discussions from many of those schools that they're not sure they can play those games?
So I think I've said before, we've looked at about 12 different models of what we could do. And so depending on what occurs, we'll make adjustments on that. And by the end of July, we should be, I guess we are in July, that we'll be making those decisions on what we try to implement. So as far as non-conference, I've had some just texts and they've sent examples of their protocols and things like that. But it's been mostly the conference commissioners at this point talking a lot as far as what are expectations and trying to come up with standard standardize levels, and then we'll drill down with the individual schools. But yeah, there's been conversations on all those fronts.
Peter?
Hi, Jim. If you guys aren't able to play this fall, or if you're only able to play with no fans in the stands, will there be a way to avoid cutting some of the non-revenue sports?
Yeah, well, we're going to, as I said, we'll adjust our budget as we go through this calendar year, and so we'll have to look at our budgets and what we're doing. I think that we're there's all kinds of scenarios from full stadiums to no fans or no TV, and those are big numbers, and we'll have to deal with them. But as far as looking at individual sports, we're not doing that at this time.
Okay, we'll go to Suichi.
Hey, Jim. I was just wondering, obviously, the Big Ten just announced, or sources and reporting have shown that they're going only conference games. I know you've kind of been asked this, but how much you consider other conferences and just kind of everything, and just making sure that you are seeing what other conferences are doing and everything?
Well, it's all taken into account, but I haven't seen anything on the Big Ten, and I'd be surprised if they were announcing that right, as we speak. I don't think so. I think people are trying to gather as much information and make those decisions. Although, the Ivy, they've made decisions on their own and in the past, and have their group that they work with closely and respect the heck out of them and know some of those coaches. And so that's a decision that's separate. Our conversations have been with the Power Fives, and we have another meeting tomorrow. Commissioner Sankey will update us on what the latest is. I've seen some that are saying no competition possibly until 1st of September. All those things are on the table, and will be discussed and decisions made at the appropriate time.
Max?
Can you hear me? Sorry.
Yep.
So I guess with everything going on, and like players going home for the 4th of July, players leaving and doing other, family events, weddings, like you were talking about, has there been recommendations as far as testing when they come back, like after they go home, testing a certain amount of time? Is there sort of protocol in place for all that, or is that sort of all?
Yeah, and Nick sits on that committee. He can tell you more detail, but there are, if someone goes away, there's self-isolation. We continue to do, actually they're testing, is it oxygen levels, Nick, or whatever, right? We stick our finger in, and then they do also temperature testing. And so we're doing that in each of our facilities as people enter. And so the good thing, we were able to catch a lot of those positives before they got in the building or were around other athletes. But yeah, it's the social side. The 4 hours or so they're eating or they're working out with our staffs, that it's the other hours of the day that could cause havoc.
If they leave for more than 12 to 24 hours, when they return to campus, they have a 5-day self-isolation period.
Thank you.
And then I would anticipate, sometime down the road before practice starts in fall camp, that certainly we would retest at some point. Eric?
There it goes again. There we go. Obviously, with the ACC reporting that no one's going to play until September 1st for the non-revenue sports, are you anticipating anything on the horizon for that, for the SEC, with volleyball or soccer not being able to start until the month of September?
We have not discussed it, but I'm sure it's it'll be discussed tomorrow, next week, as we move forward, as we get closer. But I think, as I said, we're trying to make those decisions as late as possible. So I would expect those things some of them may have to be made before July 30th, but as many as we can, we're going to try to keep those as late as possible.
Thank you.
Andrew?
Hey, Jim, how's it going? All the players we've talked to just in the past month or so have all been so positive about wanting to come back and wanting to be back on campus. I'm curious, has anything changed? Have you heard any concern from players now that, in Boone County, cases have gone up a little bit?
Actually not. I think they understand that probably the safest place they can be is working out with their teammates who have been tested, who are screened, who the facilities being sanitized. So I think they feel really, the ones I've talked to had big smiles on their face working out. So I'll have to check them in a week or so, or this tomorrow, and see how it's going, because that they as you start to work out, and continue to work out, I'm sure they'll be ready for a little bit of a break before fall camp starts.
And Jim, I just had one more question in regards to false positive tests, and I guess this is more for like the season. So say Mizzou's starting quarterback was asymptomatic and they got a test and it was positive. Would they get tested again potentially if they felt like they actually didn't have it? I'm just curious how is that a conversation that anybody's kind of having right now?
We've had the conversation as far as from Dr. Witt, who's our lead physician and on the SEC task force, and about testing, and there are false positives. And so I think he's hopeful that the tests become more accurate and they continue to get better and better. From what I understand, and there's a mouth swab as opposed to digging deep in your brain, the one that initially was used. So they're continuing to evolve, and I think it'll continue to get better and better and more accurate. But I could see that situation, Andrew, where someone tests positive and they feel great, get another test tomorrow or something the next day and see where it comes out.
Kimball?
Oh, yeah. Hi, Jim. I know that the positive numbers from Mizzou have been kind of low relative to other schools, but do you guys have kind of like a number where, like, if a number of positives were to come back, you would consider shutting down, like maybe like fall camper workouts?
No, we've talked about that at a campus level, and as far as campus, threshold and what is that? I think it's the advice from the medical professionals is let's read the data, let's understand what's going on before we make decisions like that. And so we would be referring to the CDC, through the community county health officials, through the university, through our MU Healthcare, and we'd be taking advice from all of those folks before we made decisions like that.
Mick?
Yeah, my question kind of piggybacks that one, Jim. Of course, our headlines in the media are 10 positive tests at Mizzou, but you guys, as you mentioned, tested. I think it was 367 out of 377 were negative. How did that news strike you? Is that a manageable number? Was that an expected number? Is that a low number? Were you okay, I guess, with those results coming back?
I'd prefer zero, but
Yeah,
but I think given what we're seeing across the country as people are being tested, and our lines out at our softball stadium testing site there's a heck of a lot more people that are in those lines now than there were 3 weeks ago. And so I think we're seeing more and more positive tests, more people getting tested. So it wasn't alarming. It was kind of expected that there'd be one or two positives per team, if you will, and maybe a larger one having more, but really it's kind of as expected, but still wanting to make sure that we take each of those very seriously, and with the tracing then, and isolate that person so that so that we don't have a continued growth or spread from our folks and our student athletes that have tested positive. So a lot of work is being done in that, and I just appreciate the heck out of the people that helped us design what we're doing, but also then are implementing it and continuing to stay on top of it.
Thanks.
Gabe?
Yeah, Jim, again, on the potential conference-only schedule, which I know you said you hadn't seen the reports. It's out there. It's expected to be announced today. Can you just explain, if that were to be the way conferences go, like why does that make sense? Why is it better for you guys maybe to do that as opposed to playing teams from other conferences? What's the rationale behind it?
Yeah, I think, Gabe, probably it's a comfort level of how protocols are being enacted, how testing is done, and then keeping it within that number, within that family, if you will. It's an expanded social circle or social pod, and so you might be able to control things more that way, or feel like you can anyway, and versus the unknown of people coming from outside our 11 states that were our footprint of the SEC. So those might be reasons why. I don't know. I'd have to hear from them.
Dave?
Jim, how helpful would it be for you guys if the NCAA had maybe more oversight, more rules and regulations? It seems like they leave everybody to decide on their own how to handle when it comes to testing and everything doing. Could you hear me?
So you broke
catch
up.
that?
You broke up quite a bit, but I think the question was, and you can give me a thumbs up, but would it be better for the NCAA to have more oversight over all of these areas?
Yes.
Yes and no. I guess I think the conferences do a really good job of and maybe a better job in a lot of those areas. And it's tough to make a decision in one size fits all as far as even FBS football. There's programs that have different numbers of people, different resources, and all those things. So I can see where it's difficult to try to have rules. Now, from a health and safety standpoint, it's easier to dial down and get into that, and you may see. I think you'll probably see more from the NCAA coming on that as far as health and safety, maybe some testing. But we, even just our 11 states of getting folks together and you have 14 counties that these schools are in, and they all have different situations. So it makes it difficult. And then when you add those non-conference, then you're adding someone new into that mix. And so at some point, I guess maybe the Big Ten is thinking about doing that, but we're not there yet.
Max?
Hey, I was just curious. I know Wisconsin and Northwestern announced that they weren't going to be playing at Wrigley Field. Was there any sort of talks or discussion going on about the game at Arrowhead? If that was still, being discussed as possibility of it being moved to Faroe?
Great question, Max. And we've been in discussions with the Chiefs, and we're kind of in the same boat as far as trying to determine exactly what we're going to do. And but as of right now, we plan on playing that game there.
Thank you.
Peter?
Is there I guess for like Central Arkansas or Eastern Michigan, or maybe these schools that don't have as much of a budget as Mizzou and some of the Power 5 programs, is there a minimum amount of testing I guess they would need to do for you to feel comfortable with Mizzou playing them in football?
I would take that advice from our SEC medical task force, as far as what they feel is the best model for people to use, and they've given us great advice so far, and I would look to that group, and we have Dr. Witt on there, and I would look to him. I haven't asked that question. It's coming quickly, I guess, is in the next few weeks as we determine how the schedules could play out. Testing will be a big part of that.
Karen?
Hello, Mr. Sterk. How are you?
Hi, Karen.
You're looking healthy. Just all tan and stuff. Just wondered, you alluded to the Ivy Leagues and you've alluded to, other, and you're pretty much just looking at with the Power Five. But when you see a league totally shut down, even if it is like the Ivy League, who you wouldn't be playing, of course, but does that raise a red flag? I mean, does that put everybody on alert? There is a league that has now shut fall sports down. Did that at all, cause a ripple in your thinking?
Well, I think the Ivy was more those were institutional decisions. They were making decisions based on what their institutions. I think that's what I've heard and read a little bit on it. I need to dig into it further as far as their reasons why, but I had heard it was more related to institutional decisions and gatherings and how they were going to manage their institutional challenges, and so they felt it was best not to try to have sports going on. And so I can stand corrected and someone can update me on that, but that was my initial, but I haven't seen any list of reasons.
Okay, I just wondered. Thank you very much.
Bill? Hello, Bill?
Yeah, I don't have anything else.
Oh, okay.
So,
You got your hand
sorry
up,
about that.
please.
Yeah, the hand didn't.
No
I'll be
worries.
right back. I've got to get it. Great.
Oh. Dave, back to you.
I'm back.
I'm sorry, I meant to unraise my hand.
Okay. Max? You're good. All right. Kimball?
So, do I get to ask questions, Nick?
Yeah.
So what do you guys? What's the hardest part about not having sport activities to report on? I guess it's got to be harder, to try to create content. Anybody want to volunteer? What's the hardest part of this COVID shutdown?
I'll just let you know the best part is we now know everybody's political opinions in the fan base.
You have been taking some shots. Yeah, that's true.
Yep. So very good.
I would say you can still do like a lot of features and stuff on players, but there's just I think less people are interested in reading when there's not sports going on. So it's hard to, I guess, get people engaged with the content. At least for me, that more so than the finding things, it's getting people to care is the hardest part.
Good.
For us, I think it's different only in, there's no highlights, but I think even over these 4 months, the reaction to all of this in sports has provided content, and you guys at Mizzou and other colleges and leagues and teams doing these Zooms and providing content has been great. So it hasn't been too bad on our end, but we would like the highlights back. And when your town team pays their quarterback $500 million, that creates them.
That's a pretty good story. And maybe you found it like me. Maybe you're having to work almost harder. These days have been draining and consuming. With lack of activities, that people don't understand that. For me, the highlight of our days are being able to go to an event, and that's just the add-on. What's increased is all the work work during the day that of trying to manage repopulating and understanding all these medical issues and all of those things that have hit us, the budget issues, the social, just the spotlight, that was shown on the racism in our country, and really trying to connect and listen and learn from our student athletes and how they're feeling about that. So there's been a lot of these past 3 months have been really really full, if you will.
Matt, did you have a question?
Yeah, Jim, I know that nobody wants to see a football season in the spring, but if it became a last resort in the position that you're in, what do you think would be the biggest logistical challenges to getting something like that off the ground if it ended up being the most prudent choice to have football played?
I haven't asked Tony Workus that question yet, so he's bald right already. Or balding, so he would not have much hair left trying to do it. But I really haven't spent much time thinking about that, because it's out there, and it's one of those 12 scenarios. But we haven't spent any time on that. That's the truthful answer, Matt. I wish I had a better one for you.
Oh, that's fine. Thank you.
Eric, did you have a question?
Yes, I did, and I know it's just kind of you don't want to give an answer that's wrong or anything like that. But if the conference-only model is the way you're going, would you be interested in adding more than just 8 games on the schedule? I know A&M's coming here in 2021, going to Auburn in 2022. Would there be looking into adding more conference opponents than just the 8 currently on the schedule? Should that be the way of the future for this season?
Again, I'll go back to our 12 scenario. Those are all part of the 12 scenarios out there of what we could do. So yeah, it's a possibility.
Figured it was worth a question. Thank you.
Yep.
Colin?
Hey, Jim, thanks for doing this. As someone who doesn't have any idea what the contracts for those guaranteed non-conference games looks like, is there any sense that, I know everyone is kind of struggling for money right now, but that the protections in those contracts, who they favor, or if there's some kind of shared sense of duty there that you would help, like maybe a certain percentage of that money, or would there be like lawsuits, people trying to claw back these games, the money for them? Do you know?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I'm going to throw it to Nick, so I'll give him a little bit of headway, but because he actually does our football contracts and knows them better. But I think, one, I can tell you, COVID-19 pandemic is not in the contracts that we currently have. So no one really prepared for that. As far as other legal terms that it may fall under. Nick, I'll just toss it to you.
Sure. And all of these contracts were done before I got here and before Jim, but the word epidemic is in there, as I recall. And we've also asked our general counsel to go back. They've asked us to go to each of the 4 schools and put the global pandemic in there, not only for the games this year, but moving forward. And most of the schools, certainly moving forward, have already returned those, whereas the 4 schools this year, only one of the 4 has done that so far. And I do think, I was talking to an AD friend earlier today, and I do think that that's one of the challenges in this thing is going to be, okay, if you're going to play conference games, that's great, but how are you going to unwind the non-conference piece of this for all of us? And Colin, you're right, the lawyers could become very busy here, depending on how this all shakes out in the coming months. Certainly you could try to move. One opponent said, well, we could try, if they didn't necessarily like the language, and we could maybe move the game down the road, which is fine. We're obviously scheduled pretty far out, so it'll be a long time before we'll play the game. But so I think there's some options in that regard as well. Some people have also suggested that if the opponent that you're playing non-conference doesn't necessarily have what the testing level is that the Power 5 requires, that the host institution, in this case the Power 5, would pay for the testing, and it would come out of the guarantees. So that's another option that has been discussed as well. Any other?
Good answer, Nick.
Thank you.
Good job.
Dave, did you have another question?
Yeah, Jim, there's been some talk nationally about basketball seasons. I know it's probably not the priority, about maybe moving that forward a little bit. How much talk about basketball season has there been at the conference level?
Dan Gavitt came out or mentioned, moving the games, but it was as in context, it was Commissioner Sankey had said he had shared that with the conference commissioners, but in the context of having, I don't know how many different scenarios. It was one of 5 or 6 different scenarios that they threw out there. So we haven't spent much time at all, other than that came out and we discussed it for a little bit, just that they're looking at different models as well.
Yeah. Okay.
Kimball, did you have another question?
Oh, yeah. I can't remember if this has been answered in an earlier date or not, but just to clarify, are athletes being how often are they being tested or retested? Like if a football player came and tested negative, when would they be tested, or how regularly would they be tested again, I guess?
Nick, you could
give. Yeah, they've only been each student athlete is being tested right now upon their return, their initial arrival in Columbia, if you will. And then now if you leave Columbia, you're self-isolating for 5 days. And then other student athletes, so if you're here and you develop the symptoms, then that's when you go into our protocol. You reach out to your trainer and we get you tested that way.
Okay, gotcha. I think I was just confused about that. Thank you.
Yeah, but I anticipate that we'll do another round of testing for football before fall camp begins.
Okay, awesome. Thank you.
Dave, did you have another one?
No, I'm good.
Okay. Bill, did you have another one, or did you just forget to put your hand down? I'll take it as he forgot to put his hand down.
Yeah, I don't know how to get my hand down or off or anything. It stays up there. So.
Okay. Last question for Suuchi.
Hey, just one more, I guess, testing kind of clarification. If a student athlete does test positive, I guess, I'm sure, they go through the protocols and everything, but when do they get retested to just make sure they're negative and they're kind of good to go from there?
Nick, you've had those and gone through what?
Yeah, I believe it's at the end of the 14-day period. So they're out for 14 days in that situation.
Okay, and then if they're negative, they're just good to go, right, for workouts and everything?
After they're cleared by the physician, yeah.
Jim, you asked, what is the most difficult thing? It's Zoom. Handling Zoom technology. That has been the most difficult thing.
Yeah, it took me a while. Yeah.
Yeah, I have muted things. I have turned myself upside down. In person, it would be a piece of cake. This has been a challenge.
Yeah.
Thank you for your time. You've been so nice to talk with us. We really appreciate it.
Well, thanks. It's it's good to see you all.
All right. If there are no other questions, appreciate everybody's time today. I'm sure there'll be more news in the coming weeks, and we'll probably reconvene again. It's good to see everybody, and have a great rest of your day and a good weekend.
Thanks, Jim. Thanks, Nick.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks, Jim.
Bye, Jim.